To meet the world's growing needs, the oil industry must enter unknown territories. Seeking oil in places that, politically, ethically and environmentally, were once off limits. Our dependence on oil may become a curse. In this program, we journey to the Caspian Sea to find out if the West can extract oil from the politically unstable countries of Central Asia. What you see when dawn breaks on the Caspian is a forest of oil rigs. It has taken us a long time to get this far. But Azerbaijan's state oil company has reluctantly given us permission to visit an oil rig. This is a journey that will be plagued with problems. Some official has now decided we can't film after all.
They have written permission from the president of the oil company. Yes, I understand. So they cannot film here.
We haven't come this far for nothing, so we continue to shoot when we can. Our helicopter flew us out across the Caspian. This was the first deep-water oil project in the world. Engineering on a heroic scale, it was built by the Soviets, who called it oily rocks. Piers, tens of kilometers long, reach out to the rigs from the central hub. With the Soviets gone, it all now lies crumbling and neglected. The Soviets have left their usual legacy of suspicion and paranoia, but at least we're allowed to film now. In charge of these new Western-style oil rigs is Telman Jafarov.
I started work at Oily Rocks when I was 15. This oil and gas drilling division was set up in 1990, and I came to work here. For the last year and a half, I've been in charge.
How big are the oil reserves?
Well, children will be born. There will be enough for them and future generations.
2 generations?
3.
The Caspian contains some of the largest untapped energy reserves on the planet. Estimates go as high as 200 billion barrels of oil. Today, everyone wants a piece of the Caspian. Russia, which once owned most of it, has built a pipeline from Kazakhstan to the Black Sea coast. China is planning to pump oil to Xinjiang. And now Western companies are building a massive pipeline of their own. We are going to journey along that pipeline, through some of the most geographically challenging and politically dangerous places on Earth, as it makes its way to the Mediterranean Sea. Our journey began on the shores of the Caspian. It's a graveyard of old Soviet oil rigs. The Soviet Union never had the technology to exploit these oil reserves fully. We took the road to Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. On our way, we passed an endless stream of slow, rusting oil trains, but only a fraction of Azerbaijan's oil reserves can reach the west this way. In a few years' time, 1 million barrels of oil will be flowing down the pipeline every day. That's $1 million an hour. That pipeline was a result of years of political maneuvering and labyrinthine intrigue, and it all happened here in Baku. After the collapse of Soviet power, Azerbaijan's new oil fields were up for grabs. Hundreds of Western companies and entrepreneurs flocked here. History was repeating itself. Baku's last oil boom was more than 100 years ago. In those days, the big players were the Nobels and the Rockefellers. In the 1990s, Dave Churchman was one of those who came to seek his fortune in the remains of the Soviet Empire.
When we first came here, it was sleeting and snowing. It was total chaos. You had men standing around with machine guns. It was kind of like the old Wild West. It was a strange time, but a very exciting time.
Every oil company came here and wanted a piece of the action.
So there was a tremendous amount of hype and a lot of, chaos. There are only so many contracts. There's so many oil fields. 5 or 6 companies would be bidding back then on one contract.
It was here in Baku that we met the politician Panik Huseynov. His party is in opposition now, but back then, as Prime Minister, he was center stage and in the thick of the action as Western oil companies competed frantically for what some would call the deal of the century.
In Soviet times, these companies were viewed as gigantic imperialist sharks. But we were politicians of a new age, and we saw the signing of the oil contracts as a guarantee of our independence. Although we had not intended to have special relations with a single company, priority was given to British Petroleum, and this is a fact.
Russia and Iran were appalled by the prospect of Western companies and their governments gaining influence in their own backyard.
All of a sudden, Russia closed road communications, and Iran refused to buy gasoline from us. We soon realized that large amounts of oil would be of no use without alternative routes of export. An energy corridor, a pipeline, protected by strong countries and international law, was now considered essential for our independence.
Azerbaijan and BP would eventually call it the BTC pipeline, because on its 1,100-mile journey through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, it will link the cities of Baku, Tbilisi, and Ceyhan. On September the 20th, 1994, a consortium including BP, Amoco, and Pennzoil signed the deal with the Azerbaijan government. BP would go on to acquire a majority stake in Azerbaijan's oil. Following a coup, BP found itself in business with a new president. Under Haydar Aliyev's virtual dictatorship, Azerbaijan has achieved almost comical levels of corruption. One investigation reportedly found 800 companies involved in corrupt schemes with the state oil company. And a recent European Community-funded report rates Azerbaijan as the 6th most corrupt country in the world. That's up from number 8. None of this has stopped Aliyev giving his own son virtual control of the state oil company and engineering his succession as president. Miavari Gakramanli is a labor union leader who was sacked when she started collecting evidence of corruption in the state oil company. We met her in a public place where our conversation could not be bugged.
Nobody speaks openly about corruption. There are no independent courts. All this creates conditions for corruption to flourish. The state oil company SOCAR is corrupt, yet it participates in all projects. What does BP think of this?
Miervari had been followed, and so had we. We were told the men shadowing us belonged to the Presidential Security Service. Although BP denounces corruption, it is signed a deal with a government and a state oil company widely accused of scandal.
An employee of BP phoned me. He asked about your crew and whether we'd met, and what we discussed. I said we'd met. Again he asked, what had we discussed?
We were back on the road. We left Baku and headed for a BP terminal. Sangachal will soon be the biggest oil terminal in the world. BP heads BTC, the consortium which is building the pipeline from the Caspian. It's a $3 billion bet on where the world will find its future energy needs. The project's CEO, Michael Townsend, is well aware of what a high-stake game BTC is playing.
It is a giant oil field, 6 billion barrels of oil. In a few years' time, this oil will be about a quarter of all the new energy source, energy demand in the world. It's a non-Persian, non-Russian new source of energy. That is why it has the interest of America, it has the interest of Europe, looking at diversity of suppliers, a new choice for customers, for consumers, and for countries.
But diversity comes at a price. By avoiding Russia and Iran, the pipeline faces a different set of threats.
The pipeline avoids known conflict areas along its entire length. That's the reason it's buried. Once it is in the ground, you don't see it, you don't hear it, and you certainly don't smell it. Very few people will actually know even where it is.
From Sangachal, we followed the road towards Armenia. This would have been the pipeline's most logical route. On the way, we hooked up with someone from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Our guide was Vugar Abdusalimov. A couple of hours down the road, we came across what looked like abandoned railway cars. Then we realized that the cars were packed with people. We followed Vugar across the tracks.
Well, we're now in the railway carriages station that accommodates about 400 people.
The 400 fugitives who live here are a small fraction of one of the biggest but least known refugee crises in the world.
Bir dəqiqə olar sizə xanım. Salam əleykum. Bəs bu necə alındı ki, qaçdınız?
Heç asırdılar, atırdılar, evlərimizin üstünə düşürdü. Qırat, nə bilim. ermənilər atır. Cəbrayıl rayonundan gəlmişik.
They fled from Jabrayil district as a result of a military advance. They say that our village had been shelled. People were really very afraid, and in order not to be killed, simply everybody ran, racing for their lives.
Armenian fighters are adding a tactic to punishing Azeri villages. 50 people perished, many of them women and children. Of an Armenian attack on the Azeri village. Helicopter was shot down by Armenian militia.
Ethnic tensions made this a vicious war. The fighting was concentrated on Nagorno-Karabakh, a region of Azerbaijan's inhabited mainly by Armenians. By the end of the war, Armenia had seized not only the enclave, but 20% of Azerbaijan's territory. This Azeri woman and her family have been living here for 10 years.
So she's saying that this is a dining room, and this is basically the only room that she has, and where 5 people are living.
There are 1 million refugees like her. We drove towards the front line, the way the pipeline would have come. We passed bombed-out buildings and burnt-out factories. The situation is so tense that when we asked permission to film in no man's land, we were arrested for spying. We were held for 2 hours, then escorted from the area. This is one of 7 conflict areas the pipeline must avoid, and so it loops to the north towards Azerbaijan's border with Georgia. We too headed north, trying to pick up the thread of the pipeline.
Greetings. Could you tell us where the pipeline is passing?
The Baku-Ceyhan pipeline? It will be over there, next to a village called Azagi Karsan.
Okay, great. Would you like to jump in and we'll...
His name was Camille. There's no work around here, so he had plenty of time to show us around.
I'm not sure what's going to run through it, oil or gas. I think it's oil.
Near an old Muslim cemetery, we met a farmer. People out here receive a single payment for the pipeline to pass under their land.
Will the pipeline be good for you?
Of course it will bring good to us. I'm a refugee. I was given a piece of land here. The pipeline people gave me money. 2 million manats in total.
That's about $500.
He had seemed quite happy with his $500. Didn't sound like a lot of money to us. Before long, we saw a dark shape in the distance. As we drew near, we saw that it was steel pipes, stacked 15 feet high. They spanned the horizon. It will take 150,000 sections of pipe to reach the Mediterranean. That's enough steel for 500,000 cars or 100 supertankers. But it seems that very little of the vast sums being spent on this pipeline actually trickled down to the local people, like our friend Camille.
Not many people were given jobs in the Vlach section of the pipeline. I only know of one or two. I'd very much like to work for this project, but one must have the right qualifications, which I don't have. Although I have not seen any benefits myself, maybe in the future, things will change.
We said our goodbyes to Camille. The next leg of our journey would take us to Azerbaijan's western frontier and onto neighboring Georgia. We follow the road that runs parallel with the pipeline's future route. It's wide open country out here. The miles tick by. Every petrol station we stopped at was owned by President Aliyev's brother, Jalal. At least there's a free market for something. When our engine began to overheat, we stopped to buy some oil. Roadside traders sell this bootlegged engine oil in recycled Coca-Cola bottles. Ahead of us lay the mountains of Georgia, one of the most lawless and unstable countries in the Caucasus region. And so we left Azerbaijan and crossed the border into Georgia, still side by side with the pipeline route. You can almost feel the tension here. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, there's been civil war, and 3 republics have tried to break away. The second leg of our adventure was about to begin. Unlike Azerbaijan, Georgia is a Christian country. The Georgian church is almost 1,700 years old. Georgia's kings fought long and hard against foreign tyrants, from Genghis Khan to that local boy made good, Joseph Stalin, still a hero to many Georgians. Foreign businesses face many threats here. That may be why, when we reached the capital, Tbilisi, the BTC told us that nobody was willing to talk about obstacles the pipeline must overcome in Georgia. The only people we were allowed to meet were some local hardhats who were building one of the pipeline's pump stations.
How do you think the pipeline is going to change your lives?
We are already getting on in life, so we probably will not live to see the benefits. If it is beneficial to our grandchildren, that will be good enough. If the state uses the money wisely, it will benefit everyone.
I'll be fine. I'm going to save up money and get married.
In 2004, this project will be finished. What will you do then?
It's like Pandora's box. When Zeus opened it, everything flew out. What was left? Just hope.
The words of the song go, "Fly, blackbird, fly." This was one of Stalin's favorite tunes. Georgia is not always what it seems. The mountains and passes of Georgia contain many perils for the pipeline and those who work on it. For centuries, Georgia's badlands have been a haven for smugglers, highway robbers, and kidnappers. foreign oilmen could be prime targets. For foreign businessmen like Fadi Azli from Lebanon, this is simply one of the costs of doing business here.
About 3 years ago, one of our employees was murdered. Then a year later, my assistant was kidnapped. Then a few months later, our offices were bombed. So then I realized that I should take security issues more seriously. Every now and then, a businessman is kidnapped. Definitely, kidnapping is a threat. People coming in should come in full knowledge that this is a reality.
Kidnapping is big business in Georgia. Peter Tsiskarishvili and his young wife Anna have personal experience of the kidnappers and how they operate. His position as a member of parliament made him a lucrative target.
Hello. Petra, how you doing?
I got off work late and I went to pick her up. This is it here where it all happened. So this guy came up to us, dressed in a police uniform. That's when she saw 4 people dressed in black, wearing masks, back out in those bushes there. They hit me with the handle of the machine gun, so, you know, I was pretty badly hurt. They put me in the back seat here, put her beside me, so all 7 of us drove away in my car.
Like most people who are kidnapped in Georgia, Peter was driven into the dark heart of the Pangizi Gorge. It's a dangerous place.
This is one of the block posts. The first one.
Pangizi is said to be a hideout for Al-Qaeda fugitives and Chechen rebels, fighting their bloody war of independence from Russia. Local security forces insisted on escorting us everywhere.
The worst thing of being kidnapped is that you don't know what's going to happen to you. We didn't know whether we're going to be alive or dead tomorrow.
What makes Peter's story so nightmarish is that the security services here are widely believed to collaborate with the criminals.
After I was released, I learned the authorities and criminals have a bond of making money together, dealing with narcotics, then most of the kidnappings they're involved.
Peter believes that the pipeline is so important for Georgia, there's no way the pipeline workers will ever be targeted.
People in the security, in the police, tell them who can be the targets and who cannot be the targets. Pipeline workers, they're in no case to be targeted. This is not a typical European country, unfortunately. That's why I understand this pipeline has more protection than other ones.
The presence of Islamic militants in the Pangizi Gorge has made Georgia an important battleground in Washington's war on terror. We travelled to Vasyani, 20 miles northeast of Tbilisi. There we found Georgia's then president, Edward Shevardnadze. He was forced out of office shortly after our trip. The president was inspecting the latest recruits for the US-run Train and Equip program. It is designed to train the Georgian army to play its part in the war on terror.
For the help with our many security problems, we must be grateful for the unceasing generosity of the US Congress and especially President George Bush.
The collapse of Soviet power has left a vacuum which American soldiers and diplomats like Ambassador Richard Miles are keen to fill.
Up until last summer, there was a large number of armed Chechen fighters in the Pankhizi Gorge, and there was a small handful of international terrorists, non-Chechen, non-Georgian, who were also up in the Pankhizi Gorge. President Shevardnadze made a special appeal to President Bush to help him develop an army and push these fighters and these international terrorists out.
We went to see the program in action.
Lieutenant Colvin.
Good to meet you. Good to meet you.
Welcome to Advanced Operating Base Kurtsanusi. We're going to be training these Georgian troops for 13 weeks. This is Phase 3 Delta. This is the third battalion that we've trained so far. We're teaching them from square one how to be an infantryman, and how to move tactically through a combat zone.
We wondered if the US presence served a dual purpose. Was part of their role perhaps to protect the pipeline?
As far as the pipeline goes, basically I've been told to say that that's not what we're here training these guys for. It's a war on terrorism.
The US ambassador was more forthcoming.
The primary purpose is to modernize the Georgian army, and it does have a backup role, I would say, with regard to pipeline security. The pipeline is a strategic asset for not only Georgia, but for all the countries that are involved, and one in which we have an interest. We would not want to be fully dependent on Middle Eastern oil and gas. We would not want to be dependent on Russian oil and gas. So this is another source, and therefore it's valuable.
The US is not the only great power to have an interest in this region.
If we look over here, over on that hill is that's a Russian base, and there's Russian troops that are still occupying there. So we stay on our side, they stay on their side.
The pipeline's most logical route runs straight through another Russian base in the town of Akal-Kalaki. It's a long way away, but we wanted to see it for ourselves. It was a hard drive south, and the road was mountainous. The ground had been cleared and broken to make a way for the pipeline. Security will be provided by riders on horseback. Castles stand like sentries along the road, built to resist the invading Turks centuries ago. We found a Russian base under the hulk of one such castle. It looms above the town. A local showed us around.
Now we call it a base. We used to call it Military City Number 1.
Can we go in?
I don't think so. They wouldn't appreciate that. Anyway, we'd need permission.
BTC wanted the pipeline to come this way. But the Georgian government insisted they reroute it. We went to see Georgia's then National Security Advisor, Tedo Jabaridze.
To go close by to Russian military base, even in a peaceful town, is quite dangerous, I think. Because of existence of this base, we just passed it.
Georgians believe the pipeline will help them break free from Russia's dominance of the region.
If Russia regained control over Georgia, so this would block not only Georgia from the world community, but it would close down Azerbaijan and the huge space of Central Asian republics. The energy corridor itself. PTC, it's a guarantee for Georgia's independence and freedom.
The decision to route the pipeline through the most treasured of Georgia's national parks has caused an international outcry. Because the famously pure Borjomi mineral water comes from here, and bottled water is Georgia's biggest single export. This summer, Georgia's government abruptly ordered BP to stop work on the pipeline here. In Washington, the Bush administration was horrified. Georgia claimed concern for the environment. In fact, this area is geologically unstable. If a landslide ruptured the pipeline, many believe the oil spill could devastate the ecology and wipe out the trade in mineral water. Katie Kivin-Kadse is a lawyer who's opposed to this route.
So, Grisha Papa, what happened there?
First, a large crevice appeared in our wall. It was in the spring. Then it split into two, growing by about 10 centimeters.
We were invited to a village meeting. On our way, we noticed we're being followed. The car had blacked out windows. We were not the only visitors. There was yet another group who watched and took photographs. Many here believe the pipeline will make the landslides worse.
The Georgian geologists do not hide their conviction that the situation is catastrophic. The village must be vacated.
One villager seemed to disagree.
There is no danger to the village at all. No danger whatsoever.
Of course it's dangerous. The landslide starts in the field and is spilling over into the village.
The villager wearing camouflage seemed on good terms with the other visitors. One of them turned out to be a government geologist. He saw no problem at all.
The building of the pipeline cannot and will not affect the village or the landslide itself. They are on two different expositions of land. The village is on one level and the pipeline corridor on a different tract. There is no connection between the two.
The villagers are clearly disconcerted by the controversy.
We are very afraid of being used as pawns in political maneuverings. We hope that you and your visits don't complicate our situation.
What's going on here? What's all this fuss? Who are these people? Where I was born and bred, where I shot my first arrow, that is where my motherland is. I would not exchange this land for paradise.
Following direct intervention from Washington, pipeline construction did resume in the valley. As we left the village, we were still being followed. At the bottom of the valley, Katie told us they were members of a group set up by the Georgian International Oil Corporation.
This monitoring group was set up by the oil corporations. Whenever we go up to that village, people from that group always follow us there. Today, they effectively control Borjomi. What happens here, how it happens, who comes to Borjomi, and what people say. If anything is set out of line with their views, they have devised other methods of dealing with these people.
We kept driving south from Borjomi. After about an hour, we found ourselves stuck behind this truck. It was stacked with pipes, so we decided to follow it. It was only here that we were able to get a sense of the sheer scale of this epic enterprise. We were now approaching the last international border on our journey. The Turkish leg of the pipeline stretches across 1,000 kilometers of mountains and plains. We were leaving the Caucasus. The mountains now looming in our windscreen were the Taurus Mountains of eastern Turkey. It was late when we reached the Turkish border near the one-horse town of Pozov. Next morning, we went to see a pump station under construction high up in the mountains. BTC's project manager here is Gary Allen. We were not allowed to ask him about anything except his job.
So basically, we've got a responsibility as the pump station team to connect our pump with the pipeline in order that we can then pump oil from beginning of 2005.
Are you ahead? Are you behind?
We're currently behind, but we know of a way forward. But that way forward can only be achieved if we have the weather with us. We've got no control over that. Very shortly we're going to have thick snow here, temperatures down to -20, -30. Is what we can do in those conditions.
Weather, terrain, schedule, each one presented problems that seemed insurmountable. Somehow these engineers seemed to take it all in their stride.
It's definitely time to get the winter woolies out, isn't it?
The thermometer swings from freezing cold to scorching hot.
Smile to stop my teeth chattering.
When it comes to this project, all statistics are extremes.
It's something like comparing this to the old great railway constructions. Here in Turkey, they were building 1,000 kilometers of what is essentially a wide road. We've got 80,000 joints of pipe to spread along the road before we weld them. There's a lot of, how many cubic meters of earth to move, George?
About 70,000 cubic metres of topsoil to move across to one side, and probably 100,000 cubic metres of dirt to move to make a decent road all the way through. And then you start to put the pipes down. Then after that, we have to start welding all the pipes. 80 pipes a day, which is a kilometre.
After each weld, you have to X-ray the weld. And unlike the old railway builders, we then have to come back and put all the subsoil back where it was, put all the topsoil back where it was, replant it.
Flowers, trees, even the rocks will be put back.
In eastern Turkey, the pipeline cuts through a landscape still locked in another age. We were deep into Turkey now, still following that endless line of pipes. In the year 2005, the oil will start to flow 3 feet below this farmland. Every 55 minutes, $1 million worth of oil will be pumping through. And as it does, it will pass some of the poorest villages in Turkey. We turned off the main road into one of these villages, so poor that their basic fuel is cattle dung. You can see it stacked out in the fields. Naively, many of these subsistence farmers imagine that the pipeline might help raise them out of poverty.
We burn this dung to cook bread. This is dung. We have no alternative. We would like to live a modern life. What would you have us do? Siphon our fuel from the pipeline like criminals? I think most of Turkey's 50 years behind Europe, and we are 50 years behind them.
There are some villages, 1 or 2 kilometers from here. I think the pipeline went across their land.
Kadir arkadaş bu. Merhaba. Merhaba, merhaba. 500 metre.
It passed through about 500 meters from my field.
Where is the pipeline route in this area?
They've changed the pipeline route. It was to go near our village. We are all poor people. If the pipeline had gone through my land, now I would be rich.
What little compensation is on offer would never have made him rich. But that doesn't stop the poor from dreaming.
Everyone's in debt here. If the small farmers get compensated, most just repay their debts. They have their sons and daughters married. That's how they use the money. People can hardly scratch out a living from the earth here. If only the wealth from the pipeline could come back to us.
As we left, we couldn't help wondering if these disappointed expectations might sow the seeds of political hostility towards the pipeline. Certainly, Turkey is no stranger to trouble. The Kurds have long dreamt of a separate state. In 1973, a Kurdish separatist group known as the PKK set out to unite the Kurds of southern Turkey with those of northern Iraq. Fearing that its borders might be redrawn, Turkey set out to crush the uprising. An estimated 30,000 people have perished. The worst of the fighting was in the southeast. Although the pipeline skirts this volatile region, it can't avoid every Kurdish village. BTC escorted us to a Kurdish village on the route of the pipeline. BTC's community liaison officer, Shukran Kaglian, gave us the official line.
In the southern part of Turkey, there has been a conflict between PKK and Turkish government for years. But the pipeline is not passing through those areas. It's a very different place, northeast Turkey.
The village headman, the Mukhtar, seemed pleased with the pipeline.
The importance of the pipeline is that we all benefit from it. It's good for everyone. All our people are happy about it. We are like brothers. We all agree about it.
This sounded too good to be true.
Before, they said you'll get lots of money, that your fields will be valued properly. 3 of my fields were acquired for a year's rent. No worker was hired. It contributed little or nothing to the village's economy.
There are other angrier voices who speak for the Kurds. One night, we arranged to meet Gungor Alp, a member of the main Kurdish separatist party, DHAP. The Turkish government says DHAP has links with the PKK, a terrorist organization, which DHAP deny.
The reason the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline avoids the Kurdish regions is that they see the Kurds as a potential danger. As Kurds, we have no democratic rights. We have a separate language and traditions, yet we are barred from writing and reading the Kurdish language.
Turkey has refused to make any concessions to the national aspirations of the Kurds, so the PKK embarked on a war of terror.
Attacks on Turkish targets across Europe.
A series of murderous attacks led to the inevitable cycle of government retaliation and oppression. In the Turkish government's campaign against the terrorists, countless innocents have been caught in the crossfire.
Troops and planes have also besieged Kurdish rebels holed up in the mountains of southeast Turkey.
For 15 years, our people died. Villages were burned. People driven from their homes or sent into exile. Their land confiscated. In 1999, a halt was called to the fighting. Presently, there is a growing danger of war, with rumors of planned assassination. If violence should emerge again, I believe the pipeline corridor will be one of the first targets to hit.
These are the rocks that we have exploded in our site, in the tank farm area. So we are transporting them here. At the end of this jetty, we will have our ships loaded.
After 5 weeks on the road, we were at the end of our journey.
We're at the end of the BTC pipeline. What we're aiming to do is to export 1 million barrels of oil a day through this terminal. To me, it fills me with excitement. In less than 18 months, we're actually going to have oil coming out of that pipeline. That's a tremendous achievement.
As these understandably proud engineers reeled off their facts and figures, the pearls of the pipeline seemed 1 million miles away.
This is a magical place to have a terminal because it's adjacent, if you look over there, to an existing terminal, and that's from the pipeline from Iraq. Currently it's not working because it's been blown up a couple of times.
The hard facts of geopolitics keep intruding. The BTC pipeline is being built to ensure that Western oil supplies will no longer depend on the violent vicissitudes of the Middle East. We have followed the pipeline through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. It's supposed to herald a new era in energy policy. It could bring with it prosperity and stability, or it could become a target for envy and anger, a hostage to the politics of these lawless regions. The West needs the pipeline and the oil that flows through it. But as we headed home, we wondered, can it deliver?
Tonight's winner will take